Puebla, Mexico, March 15, 2019. A boy, barely 4 years old, walks through the corridors of the General Hospital with his mother, Maria Elena Vasquez. The little one had just come out of emergency surgery after a domestic accident that almost cost him his life. The doctors said it was a miracle he survived, but what happened in the following 48 hours would forever change the life of this family and challenge everything we know about life, death, and human consciousness. Because when little Diego woke up completely from the anesthesia, he was no longer the same child. His first words froze the blood of everyone in the room. "Mommy, I died, but not here. I died before, when I was Carlos. The bullet came in here," he said, pointing exactly to his chest, at the level of the heart. The mother thought it was post-surgical delirium. The doctors tried to explain it as temporary mental confusion. But Diego continued. "I was 23 years old. It was 1987, and I worked at the Civil Hospital of Guadalajara. Do you remember me, Mommy? Did you cry so much when I died?" Maria Elena had never been to Guadalajara, had never known anyone named Carlos. And her son Diego, only 4 years old, shouldn't even know what year he was living in, much less specific details about a hospital 1,000 kilometers away. But this was only the beginning. The most documented reincarnation story ever recorded in Mexico. A story that would involve doctors, psychologists, forensic investigators, and that would be studied by the National Autonomous University for more than 3 years. A story you are about to know and that will forever change your perspective on the mysteries of human consciousness. Because what Diego would reveal in the coming days was not only impossible, it was verifiable. To understand what happened to Diego, we need to go back 3 days before the accident. Diego Vasquez was a completely normal child. He played with toy cars, watched cartoons, and like any 4-year-old boy, his biggest concern was choosing between chocolate or vanilla ice cream. He spoke only a few basic words in Spanish and had never shown interest in hospitals, medicine, or anything related. He was the only child of Maria Elena, a 31-year-old seamstress, and Jose Vasquez, a mechanic. A simple, hard-working family that lived in a small apartment in the San Manuel neighborhood. Neither parent had medical training. They had never lived outside Puebla. But on the morning of March 12, Diego suffered an accidental fall from the internal staircase of the building. Head trauma, significant blood loss. Paramedics said he had stopped breathing for almost 2 minutes during transport. At the General Hospital, the emergency team worked for hours to stabilize him. The surgery lasted 5 hours. During the procedure, Diego went into cardiac arrest twice. Twice he was resuscitated. And it was exactly after the second resuscitation that everything changed. When Diego finally opened his eyes 3 days later, he did not ask for his mother, did not ask for water, did not cry as any child would. He said, "Doctor, where are the other injured? The shooting was very serious. I need to help." Head nurse Carmen Morales, who had worked for 20 years in pediatric emergency, said she had never seen anything like it. A 4-year-old child using precise medical terminology, asking about multiple injuries and trauma protocol. It was impossible. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Because Diego had not simply changed personality, he had become another person with memories, knowledge, and a history that belonged to someone who had died 32 years before he was born. On the 4th day of hospitalization, something happened that made the medical team at the General Hospital stop everything they were doing. Diego was being examined by Dr. Roberto Mendoza, a pediatric neurologist with 15 years of experience. It was a routine exam to assess possible neurological sequelae from the trauma, standard procedure. But when the doctor began to test Diego's reflexes, the boy looked directly at him and said, "Doctor, you're doing it wrong. To evaluate post-trauma neurological injury, you need to start with the pupillary reflex with direct light, then test the corneal reflex, and only then move on to the deep tendon reflexes. That's basic neurology protocol." Dr. Mendoza was in absolute shock, not only because of the technical words perfectly pronounced by a 4-year-old child, but because Diego was right, completely right. It was as if I was talking to a medical colleague. He knew terminology that not even third-year medical students master. He spoke accurately about things that took me years to learn. But Diego didn't stop there. He looked at the doctor's stethoscope and said, "That model is old, doctor. At the Civil Hospital of Guadalajara, where I worked, we used the Littman Cardiology Treasuris, much better for detecting heart murmurs in polytraumatized patients." Dr. Mendoza almost dropped the stethoscope. First, how could a 4-year-old child know about different stethoscope models? Second, the Littman Cardiology Sera was released in 1999, long before 1987, the year Diego constantly mentioned. "But doctor," he continued, "you seem worried. I know it's hard to believe, but I really worked there. I was a second-year resident, specializing in emergency and trauma. My supervisor was Dr. Hernandez. Miguel Hernandez had a scar on his left hand from an accident he had when he was an intern." At that moment, Dr. Mendoza made a decision that would change everything. He picked up his phone and called the Civil Hospital of Guadalajara, not to verify if Diego was telling the truth, that seemed impossible, but to prove the boy was delirious. The answer he received froze his blood, because what he discovered on the other end of the line was not only possible, it was documented. The call from Dr. Mendoza to the Civil Hospital of Guadalajara changed everything. On the other end of the line, the secretary of the medical archive confirmed, "Yes, doctor, we have records of a resident named Carlos Mendoza Garcia, second year of residency in emergency and trauma. He died in July 1987, and yes, his supervisor was indeed Dr. Miguel Hernandez. And yes, Dr. Hernandez had a visible scar on his left hand." When Dr. Mendoza hung up the phone, his hands were trembling. He immediately called Diego's parents and explained the impossible. Their 4-year-old son had just provided precise information about a doctor who had died 32 years before he was born. Maria Elena and Jose could not process the information. How was this possible? How did Diego know things that not even they knew? And why did he insist so much that he needed to go home in Guadalajara? For 3 days, Diego became increasingly agitated. He did not eat well, did not sleep, constantly repeating, "I need to go home. My family is waiting for me. They don't know I'm okay." It was then that Maria Elena made the most difficult decision of her life. She said, "If this can bring peace to my son, we're going to Guadalajara." The 7-hour drive was intense. Diego, who had never left Puebla, began to give specific directions as soon as they entered the city. "Turn right on Juarez Avenue, now left on Morelos Street. The house is the third on the corner, the blue one with the white gate." Jose followed the instructions, skeptical. How could a child know the streets of a city he had never visited? But when they arrived at the address Diego had indicated, everyone sat silently. There it was, exactly as Diego had described, a blue house with a white gate, and in the front garden, an elderly woman was watering the plants. Diego got out of the car, ran toward her and said, "Mommy Rosa, I'm back. It's me, Carlos. I didn't really die." The woman dropped the watering can because she was Rosa Garcia, 74 years old, and Carlos Mendoza Garcia had been her son. The son who had tragically died in 1987 at the age of 23, victim of a shooting at the hospital where he worked. The son she had mourned for 32 years and who was now standing before her in the eyes and voice of a 4-year-old boy she had never seen in her life.
But the most disturbing part was yet to come. What happened in the house on Morelos Street, number 237, defied any logical explanation. Rosa Garcia, still in shock, invited the family inside. Her hands trembled as she opened the gate. Diego walked in as if it were his own home. "Mom Rosa, you changed the living room around," Diego said, looking around. "The television used to be there by the window, and the brown sofa was facing the wall, not the center." Rosa almost fainted. "How? How do you know that? I changed the furniture just 2 years ago. Carlos died more than 30 years ago." But Diego kept walking through the house with terrifying familiarity. "My room was the second hallway to the right. The bed was under the window because I liked to watch the stars before sleeping." He stopped at the bedroom door and said, "Can I go in?" Rosa opened the door with trembling hands. The room was exactly as Carlos had left it. She had never had the courage to touch anything. Diego went in and went straight to a drawer of the dresser. "Here are my things," he said, opening the drawer. Inside, medical diplomas, a stethoscope, and a graduation photo of Carlos at age 21. "And here," Diego pointed under the bed, "is my emergency bag." Jose, Diego's father, bent down and pulled out a dusty medical bag. Inside, medical equipment from the 1980s, expired medications, and a hospital ID card with the name Carlos Mendoza Garcia, emergency resident. But the most shocking discovery came when Diego went to the bathroom. "Behind the bathroom mirror there's an envelope," he said, "with photos of a girl. I never told anyone because she was married." Rosa was confused. "Carlos never told me about any girl." Diego climbed onto a chair, removed the mirror, and exactly where he had said, there was a yellowed envelope. Inside, 12 photographs of a young brunette woman with romantic dedications on the back. "For Carlos, with all my love, Ana Maria." Rosa began to cry. Ana Maria had been a nurse at the hospital. She came to the funeral. She had said they were just colleagues, but Diego wasn't finished. "In the backyard, under the big mango tree, I buried a metal box with the letters she wrote to me." 10 minutes later, Jose and Rosa were digging in the exact spot Diego indicated. 1 meter down, they found a small, rusted metal box. Inside, 27 love letters from Ana Maria to Carlos, all dated between January and June 1987. The last letter was dated July 15, 1987, 3 days before Carlos's death. It read, "My love, I can't hide this from my husband anymore. Tomorrow I'll tell him everything. If he forgives me, we can be together. I love you, Carlos." Diego looked at Rosa and said, in the voice of a child but with the weight of an adult, "She never got to tell him, Mommy, because I died first." Tension. This is a real story. The difficult journey of this family began with the impossible conviction of a 4-year-old remembering a life he never lived. The next day, Rosa Garcia made a brave decision. She called the Civil Hospital of Guadalajara and asked to speak with someone from the medical archives. "I need information about my son, Carlos Mendoza Garcia. He died here in 1987. The archives secretary, Mrs. Patricia Herrera, who had worked at the hospital for 35 years, immediately remembered the case. "Ah, yes, the resident who died in the shooting on July 18th. Terrible case. I have all the documents here." Rosa asked if she could go there with her family, including Diego. She needed to understand what was happening. 2 hours later, in the medical archive of the Civil Hospital of Guadalajara, Patricia Herrera laid out on the table all the documents related to the death of Carlos Mendoza Garcia. Death certificate, forensic reports, witness statements, photographs of the crime scene. "It was a robbery," Patricia explained. 2 armed men entered the emergency room at 11:47 p.m. Carlos was on duty. When they tried to take the controlled medications, he reacted to protect the patients. Diego, who had till then been quietly playing with a toy, lifted his eyes and said, "The man in the red shirt had a scorpion tattoo on his right arm. The other was shorter and limped on his left leg. They didn't want to hurt anyone at first." Patricia froze. Slowly, she picked up the police statement of a nurse who witnessed the crime. 2 individuals. One wearing a red shirt with visible tattoo on the right arm, scorpion shape. The second, of short stature, presented a limp in the left leg. The document had been there for 32 years, word for word the same as what Diego had just said. "But there's more," Diego continued. "When I saw the man in the red shirt trying to protect Mrs. Esperanza, she was admitted with pneumonia in bed 12. He shouted, 'Get out of the way, doctor!' I said, 'I won't let you hurt her.' That's when he shot me." Patricia, her hands trembling, searched for another document. It was the statement of the patient. "Esperanza Morales, 67 years old, bed 12, admitted with pneumonia. Dr. Carlos stood in front of my bed. He said he wasn't going to let them hurt me. The bandit yelled to get out of the way. The doctor didn't move. Then the man shot him." Diego looked at the papers and pointed to a black and white photo. "That's Mrs. Esperanza. She had a rosary in her hand. She kept praying softly all night. She survived." Patricia checked the records. Esperanza Morales was discharged 3 days after the incident. She lived until 2003. Good, Diego said, smiling for the first time since arriving in Guadalajara. She was very good to me. She always offered me honey candies she kept on the nightstand. Rosa began to cry. Not tears of sadness, but tears of a mother who finally understood that her son had died as a hero and that, somehow, impossibly, he had returned to tell his story. But the hospital records revealed something even more extraordinary. What Patricia Herrera showed next left the entire family in shock. "There's something else," she said, taking a special folder from the archive. "Something very few people know. Carlos left a recording. It was an old microcassette dated July 17, 1987, one day before his death. Carlos had the habit of recording medical notes about complex cases. This was the last recording he made. It was never included in the case file because, well, you'll understand." Patricia placed the microcassette in an old device and pressed play. The voice of Carlos, a 23-year-old young man, filled the room. Personal notes. Carlos Mendoza Garcia, July 17, 1987, 20:30 hours. "I just finished my shift and I'm worried. Something strange is happening in the hospital. Suspicious movement in the controlled medications area. 2 men were here yesterday asking questions about security protocols. One of them had a scorpion tattoo on his arm, the other limped visibly. They didn't pretend to be inspectors from the Ministry of Health, but something didn't add up. I'll notify security tomorrow." The voice stopped. Everyone was silent. Then Diego approached the recorder and said, "Can I talk?" Rosa nodded, still processing what she had just heard. Diego spoke directly into the microphone, as if speaking with an old friend. "Carlos, it's me, or rather, it's us. You couldn't notify security, remember? They came back the next day, right when you were taking care of Mrs. Esperanza." Patricia turned the recorder back on, and what happened next was recorded and later studied by paranormal specialists from the National University. Because when Diego continued speaking, a second voice began to respond through the recorder. "I can hear you. How is this possible?" It was Carlos's voice, but Carlos had been dead for 32 years, and the recorder was playing a conversation that was happening at that exact moment. "It's possible because we are the same soul. You didn't really die. You came with me. That's why I remember everything. Ana Maria received my letter. You didn't die before she could tell her husband, but she truly loved you, Carlos. She cried at your funeral. And Mom Rosa, it's okay. She kept your room exactly the same, and she loves you very much." The conversation lasted exactly 7 minutes and 23 seconds. It was fully recorded by Patricia Herrera and later analyzed by forensic audio technicians. The analyses confirmed they were 2 distinct voices, one of a 4-year-old boy, the other of a young man, impossible to have been fabricated with 2019 technology. But the most impressive part of the recording was at the end.
"Diego, I need to tell you something important about why I came back." Carlos's voice continued through the recorder, revealing something that would change everything. "Diego, I didn't come back just to say goodbye. I came back because there is something that needs to be corrected, something only you can do now." Diego leaned closer to the microphone. "What is it, Carlos?" "My body. They never buried me in the right place. There was an error in the cemetery. My tombstone is on grave 247, section C, but my body was buried 50 meters north, in grave 312, section D. No tombstone, no identification." Rosa was confused. "How? I attended the burial. You were buried where your tombstone is." Carlos's voice replied, "There were 2 burials that day, Mummy. The gravedigger mixed up the bodies. The man in grave 312 is in my place, and I am in his." Then Diego said something that left everyone paralyzed. "In grave 312, section D, exactly 2.3 meters deep, they will find a brown coffin with golden fittings. Inside, besides the body, there is a graduation ring from the Faculty of Medicine of the University of Guadalajara with the initials CMG engraved inside." Patricia Herrera wrote down everything frantically. "How? How can a 40-year-old know such precise measurements?" "Because I am Carlos," Diego simply replied, "and I need to rest in the right place to be at peace." But the most impressive revelation was still to come. In the coffin, besides the ring, they will find a letter. I wrote it for Ana Maria the night before I died, but I never managed to give it to her. It's in the inside pocket of the blue jacket I was wearing. 2 days later, Rosa obtained judicial authorization for the exhumation of grave 312, Section D, at the Guadalajara Municipal Cemetery. The coordinates provided by Diego were followed exactly. At precisely 2.3 meters deep, the grave diggers found a brown coffin with golden fittings. When they opened it, the impossible became reality. There was the body of a young man in an astonishing state of preservation after 32 years buried. He was wearing a blue jacket. On his left hand, a graduation ring from the Faculty of Medicine of the University of Guadalajara with the initials CMG engraved inside. In the inside pocket of the jacket, exactly where Diego had said, was a sealed envelope with the name Ana Maria handwritten on it. The forensic exam confirmed it was indeed Carlos Mendoza Garcia. His fingerprints matched the hospital records from 1987.
Rosa opened the letter in the presence of authorities and family members. My dear Ana Maria, if you are reading this, it means I did not survive. I want you to know that you were the love of my life. Do not blame yourself for anything and be happy. Wherever I am, I will always be watching over you with all my eternal love. Carlos. Diego, who had been silently observing everything, approached the coffin and said, Now I can rest in peace. Thank you for helping me get here. At that moment, something extraordinary happened. A deep sense of peace took hold of everyone present, and for the first time in 32 years, Carlos Mendoza Garcia was buried in the right place, with his tombstone beside his family. But Diego's story still had one last chapter, the most important of all. 3 weeks after Carlos's burial, something extraordinary happened at Rosa Garcia's house. Diego had returned to Puebla with his parents, but he continued calling Rosa every day. The conversations always ended the same. Mama Rosa, I need to go back there. There's someone I need to find. When Rosa asked who, Diego always answered, You'll know when she arrives, Chin. And on the morning of April 15, 2019, exactly 1 month after Diego's accident, someone rang the doorbell of the house on Morelos Street. Rosa opened the door and found a woman of about 55 with graying hair, holding a bouquet of white flowers. Sorry to bother you, Señora, the woman said. My name is Ana Maria Herrera. I worked with your son, Carlos, at the hospital. I heard you found a letter. Rosa nearly fainted. Ana Maria, the nurse from the secret love affair, had returned after 32 years. Please come in, Rosa said, still trying to process the impossible coincidence. Ana Maria entered the living room and began to explain. I got married, had children, built a life, but I could never forget Carlos. When I read in the news about the exhumation and the letter, I needed to come. At that moment, the phone rang. It was Diego calling from Puebla. Mama Rosa, she arrived, didn't she? Ana Maria? Rosa froze. How could Diego know? How do you... Because Carlos told me she would come today. He's here next to me. He wants to talk to her. Rosa handed the phone to Ana Maria, who was trembling. Hello? Diego's voice came through the phone, but the tone, the intonation, was completely different. It was Carlos's voice. Ana Maria, my love, you are more beautiful than I remembered. Ana Maria began to cry uncontrollably. Carlos, it's really you. It's me, my love. I received your letter, the one from July 15th. I so badly wanted to stay and talk about our future. Carlos, I'm so sorry. I should have told my husband earlier if I had... Don't blame yourself, Ana. You did what you believed was right, and I understand. I always understood. The conversation lasted 45 minutes. Ana Maria and Carlos spoke about everything, the plans they had together, the children she had, the life he never got to live. At the end, Carlos said, Ana, I need to ask you something. You have a 28-year-old son, Miguel, who is studying medicine, right? Ana Maria was startled. How do you know that? Because I've been watching over him, even if you didn't know. He's going to graduate next year and become an incredible doctor, just like his father. His father, Ana. Miguel is not your husband's son. He is my son, our son. The silence was absolute.
You got pregnant 2 weeks before I died. Do you remember our last night together at the apartment on Hidalgo Street?" Ana Maria was sobbing. "I always knew. Miguel has your eyes, your way of speaking, but I was never certain. He is our son, Ana, and he needs to know the truth. Not to destroy your family, but to understand why he always felt different, why he always wanted to become a doctor, even though there are no doctors in your husband's family. Ana, tell him his biological father died a hero, that I love him more than anything, and that I am proud of the man he has become." When the call ended, Ana Maria was transformed. She had carried a secret for 32 years, and now she could finally free not only herself, but also the son who had never known who his real father was. But the most impressive revelation was still to come, because Miguel Herrera, Ana Maria's son, was at that very moment finishing his medical residency in emergency and trauma at the Civil Hospital of Guadalajara, the same place where his father had died 32 years earlier. The case of Diego Vasquez reached the ears of Dr. Carmen Mendoza, a psychiatrist specializing in consciousness phenomena at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. For 6 months, she and her team meticulously studied every aspect of the story. Audio recordings were analyzed by forensic experts, medical documents were verified by 3 independent institutions, witnesses were interviewed under strict scientific protocols. The result was a 247-page study published in the Mexican Journal of Paranormal Research in December 2019. The conclusions were revolutionary. The subject, Diego Vasquez, demonstrates medical knowledge impossible for his age and education. He possesses verifiable information about events that occurred 32 years before his birth. He presents capacities that challenge current models of consciousness and memory. But the most impressive part was what happened during the studies themselves. Researchers visiting Diego in Puebla began reporting strange experiences. Some described vivid dreams with a young doctor. Others mentioned sensations of presence during interviews. Dr. Carmen Mendoza confessed, "In 25 years of studying paranormal phenomena, I have never seen anything like this case. It's as if Carlos were truly present, guiding the revelations through Diego." And indeed, Diego continued to provide information that proved accurate. He revealed that at the Civil Hospital of Guadalajara, there was a secret archive of unsolved cases from 1987. The archive was found exactly where he indicated. Inside were 17 cases of suspicious deaths never properly investigated, including Carlos's. He provided the full names and addresses of the 2 criminals who had killed Carlos. Both had already died, but the information perfectly matched police investigations from the time. He described with surgical precision the original layout of the Civil Hospital of 1987 before the 1991 renovations, details only someone who had worked there could know. But the most definitive proof came when Miguel Herrera, Ana Maria's son, agreed to take a DNA test. The results confirmed it was indeed Miguel was the biological son of Carlos Mendoza Garcia. When Miguel knew the truth, his reaction was surprising. He said, "I always knew there was something different about me. Since I was a child, I had recurring dreams of a hospital with medical emergencies. Now I understand why." The whole story was documented and today is part of the official archives of the National University. The case is studied by researchers worldwide as one of the strongest pieces of evidence of reincarnation ever recorded. Diego, now 7 years old, continues living normally with his parents in Puebla. The memories of Carlos gradually faded, as if the mission had been completed. He still visits Rosa Garcia monthly. He plays in the garden where he once found the buried box, but now he is just a normal child, free from the memories that once tormented him. And Rosa Garcia, at 76 years old, finally found peace. "My son came back to finish what was left undone. Now he can rest, and so can I."